Regina Larco, and you're listening to #Impact, a podcast about stuff that matters. I absolutely adore the moments when our guest hosts step in and curate an episode, inviting a guest on the show that inspires them. Today, I proudly present to you Chandni Sacheti in her guest host debut on #Impact. And I can't believe that this is her very first experience as a podcast host because, as you will hear, she is such a natural. I was first introduced to Chandni in Hong Kong. Back then, she had already started working on her idea, Lives Without Knives, that has since evolved into a youth-led social enterprise, empowering individuals to embrace plant-forward, sustainable, and conscious choices. I knew Chandni would be a wonderful guest host, and it's been such a joy and privilege to guide her through getting ready for her very first podcast recording. And she couldn't have picked a better guest. Together with Abigail Coleman of Blue Zone's Kitchen, Chandni explores the Blue Zone's philosophy and food as a pillar of longevity. They discuss the future of wellness and food systems, and they talk about mission-driven leadership. I learned so much from both of them, and I know you will do too. If you would like to guest host one of our episodes, you absolutely can. Or if you would like to sponsor our production, I encourage you to get in touch with me at regina@impact.com. We love working with purpose-driven individuals and organizations that don't just talk about making an impact, but that are taking action.
Hello, fellow listeners. Welcome to Season 6 of the #Impact podcast. I am Chandni Sacheti, and I'm honored to be your guest podcast host today. Today, we are joined by Abigail Coleman, the Chief Operating Officer at Blue Zone's Kitchen. With over 20 years of experience in building and scaling businesses across food tech, fintech, and healthcare, Abigail brings a wealth of expertise to her role. Her career includes leadership positions at Amazon and VC-backed startups where she excelled in brand building and digital disruption. Today, Abigail leads Blue Zone's Kitchen in creating and selling meals crafted for longevity, inspired by the diets of the world's longest living communities. Their mission is to make it easier for people to adopt healthier eating habits that align with proven principles of long-term wellness. Abigail's entrepreneurial leadership, global experience, and passion for transformative change have been instrumental in driving growth and innovation at Blue Zone's Kitchen. I am so excited to now hear her insights on building impactful brands and her journey toward making longevity and wellness an attainable goal for everyone. So without further ado, let's get started. Abigail, thank you so much for being here. Let's begin with hearing about Blue Zone's Kitchen's missions and initiatives. How does your work at Blue Zone's Kitchen empower people to live healthier, more conscious lives?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And what a kind and generous introduction. So Blue Zones are the places in the world where people live the longest, healthiest lives. They're living into their 90s and their 100s with lower rates of disease, lower rates of cancer, lower rates of heart disease, and very low rates of dementia. So these are great years. So for 20 years, over 20 years, the explorer Dan Buettner has been studying these Blue Zones to understand what their secrets of longevity are. And the original 5 Blue Zones, when you first look at them, are scattered across the globe and don't appear to have really easy things you can pick out that feel like they're in common. Geographically, there's Sardinia in Italy, Icaria, Greece, Okinawa, Japan, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Loma Linda, California. These are various geographies. You've got an island, you've got a city that's outside of LA. What do these have in common? And what's really fascinating is the work and the research that Dan has done has found some very strong commonalities that all of these communities hold that help the populations inside the communities live these longer, healthier lives. And they broadly fall into four areas, and there's more specificity in each one, but the broad areas are connection. And this one is quite important. If you think about even the definition of a blue zone, it is a community where there is greater longevity. So there's a natural sense that this group of people experiencing longevity on a community level, they must be connected. And so it's the power and the strength of those connections that's actually feeding back into the community itself. There's having the right outlook to life. This is both having a broader purpose and reason to get up every day, but then also having the right sort of methods and tools to keep stress at bay. We all experience stress as humans, but these communities tend to have ways to really live a lower stress lifestyle. The third area is movement. And this is definitely way more in the camp of natural movement, constant, more low impact movement, not hours at the gym. And then the fourth area that's most relevant to Blue Zone Kitchen is eating wisely. So the commonalities that exist within these original 5 blue zones are actually things that are so accessible as humans. I mean, that's what's so beautiful about all of the research that's done into the blue zones is it's not done in a lab somewhere where it's like, oh, this has been lab studied and, it's proven in a lab, but then in real life, it falls apart. These are real humans that, they don't have different genes than you or I. They are really just living and living by principles that help them live these healthy, really fulfilled lives. And so that sense of humanity and optimism is also a big part of what drives the blue zones forward. Because when you read about these and you hear, some of these concepts being quite simple, they feel accessible. And then you work slowly to bring them into your life. And it's not like a lot of longevity not only lives in the realm of pharmaceuticals and pills, but it also, I think, lives in the realm of shame. Like you didn't get up at 4 a.m. and you didn't have enough cryo or cold plunge or whatever the practice is that's like really tough and shows how hardcore you are. These are principles for living that are about being filled with joy and purpose and connection and feeling good in your body and feeding your body well. And all of those things feel very both possible as regular humans and very optimistic globally that it can be attainable by all of us. So that's a bit about Blue Zones itself.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's honestly so interesting to see because I feel like in modern society, we're conditioned to feel that we have to like do red light therapy and do all these supplements and do like 9 a.m. Pilates to like have actual healthy lives. And we've been programmed to think that all these things pushed by capitalist society is what we really need to live wellness and healthy lives in our reality. But Blue Zones really brings to light that it's really not that hard. It's not that complicated. It's not that inaccessible or something only the luxurious and the rich can afford. But truly, this philosophy can be a part of our everyday lives, no matter what socioeconomic status you belong to, no matter what financial background you have, no matter what day-to-day like life you have. It's really attainable for everyone. And that's a beautiful thing. So thank you for sharing that. And I hope our listeners will take something away from that itself. But let's segue into your work at Blue Zones Kitchen. So let's hear about your mission and initiatives and what really does your work at Blue Zones Kitchen do to empower people to live healthier and more conscious lives?
Absolutely. So I mentioned that one of the commonalities of the Blue Zones is eating wisely. And that actually, this part is so exciting to me is that these areas of the world that are very far reaching, and when you think in your mind, what are people in Okinawa eating, and how is that similar to people in Nicoya Peninsula, Costa Rica? What kind of overlap is there? And it's just so fascinating to see where that overlap is and how much of it is really focused on a mostly whole food, plant-based diet. So the eating wisely pillar of understanding how people in blue zones eat is another area that over the years, as Dan Buettner has done all of this research and shared it, and he's been writing books and giving talks and engaging with organizations and with cities and towns in order to bring these findings and help people adopt them. As he's given lectures and had one-on-one conversations, people get so lit up and they say, I want to do this. I want to make connections in my community. I want to join something that's meaningful. I want to bring purpose to my life. Like I can see a path to all of these. And the stumbling block for most people is the eating wisely. When they hear mostly whole foods, plant-based, it's kind of a shock to the system. Like, oh, I can't do that. How would I do that? And there's just a really big gap between hearing that and then being able to enact that, largely because the American food system is set up to booby trap you every step of the way. I mean, the amount of products that are created to tap into these, desires that we have and to overload our systems and speak over our natural, intuitive ways of eating. I mean, it's just, you are not set up for success. And so a big part of what has been sort of developed alongside of eating wisely, just as a statement, this is the way that people in blue zones eat, is also the how they achieve that. Because sitting in America surrounded by fast food, you think, wow, these people must be they must have the most strongest powers, and they must be able to just resist temptation. And in fact, again, they are no different than you or I, but their environment actually helps them be successful. And so part of eating wisely is setting up your environment for success so that the easy choice that you're making is actually the one that is the healthy choice, and not fighting past all the easy choices to get to a very difficult, healthy choice. Nobody's going to win in that situation. So there is this really strong, what's the word I'm looking for? There is this really strong battle that's happening between the knowledge that we have about how people are eating in these blue zones and the ability of Americans in this environment to adopt that. So Blue Zone's kitchen was created in the middle of this battle to enable Americans to be able to eat the Blue Zone's way very easily. And this is taking the knowledge that our food system today is not setting up anyone for success. And it's also with the full knowledge that when I say to eat mostly whole foods, plant-based, most Americans are turned off by that. So we have a big job, right? We have to make it so easy that the easy choice is the healthy choice. And we have to make it so delicious that people actually reframe how they think about whole foods, plant-based foods in general. So we are really about lighting a fire in people and showing them this way of eating. And hopefully it leads to a lot more changes in the way that they're eating, not just the individual meal that they're having with us. The findings of the specific findings of the way that people eat in blue zones, like where their caloric consumption falls, about 60% of their calories are coming from beans, greens, whole grains, tubers, and nuts. So that is the most of their meal coming from there. And when you look at their consumption on a monthly basis, about 90% of their calories are coming from whole food plant-based, with only about 10% of their calories coming from animal protein. I'm not a meat eater myself, but the idea that we can say to the American population, I understand that you have these cravings for meat and that you want to keep eating meat, and that can be okay. But think about the way that you're doing it as something in connection with someone else, in celebration, and not on an everyday, this is what you need in order to nourish your body. So there is still optimism even in like making those changes that I really do appreciate and love. So at Blue Zone's Kitchen, while we take that information about how people are literally taking in their calories, what we've taken on is that 90% that's whole food plant-based. We feel like it's very easy for people to find their own animal proteins. So we just 100% focus on whole foods plant-based. And what we want to do is present a meal that is made of beans, greens, grains, tubers, and nuts as a complete representation of this is how people in the Blue Zones eat. And it is incredibly nutritious, yes, very easy. And so that has to do with the format that we've chosen. And then our internal term is maniacally delicious. So good that you're kind of obsessed with it. Like, it's not like, oh, health food. Okay, great. I'm eating something healthy and kind of like not psyched about it, but like so good. You're like, I crave that. I can't wait for it. And so it's a high bar. But we're so excited with the initial products that we have out in market, which are frozen meals. And that gets to the ease and the accessibility. So they're frozen meals made up of very high quality vegetables and beans and whole grains. And they are incredibly delicious because we've taken the inspiration of the culinary cues of these amazing Blue Zones, which are global. And so when you have this global inspiration, you can bring in all the amazing global flavors. So we end up with these meals that are just, they're awesome. And they really can help people achieve eating in a whole foods plant-based way, while not sort of sacrificing either on the ease or on the deliciousness side, the satiety side. So that's what we do.
Thank you for sharing that. That was really, really great to hear about Blue Zone's Kitchen's mission and seeing how well you guys do it, especially in terms of reforming the traditional American food system, truly one meal at a time. I think it's a huge inspiration for all of us. And honestly, something that is very needed in this society where a bag of Cheetos is more accessible than a vegetable or like literally an apple. There definitely needs this change where we can emphasize how whole food plant-based foods are not only accessible to everyone, but also actually the better option or something that people actually want as opposed to that bag of Cheetos. And I think it really starts with making it more accessible the way Blue Zone's Kitchen does, and having it in the freezers and having it accessible to everyone and having it at Whole Foods. I saw it yesterday, actually. I myself bought the sesame ginger miso bowl, which I can't have to have today. But I think it's a really great thing that Blue Zone's Kitchen is doing, and really fits so well into the Blue Zone's philosophy where you're promoting the fact that food is more than just medicine. It's a key pillar of longevity. And that brings us to our next question in terms of shaping the future of wellness. So with your unique perspective, what trends are you seeing that will shape the future of food, wellness, and social impact? And do you think that conscious diets can and will appeal to everyone?
This is a great question. So there are a couple of things that I'm seeing that I think are really important that we think about a lot. And the first is the conversation that's happening around fiber is so exciting to me. I feel like there's been a shift in understanding that fiber is not just a physical internal sweep, but actually it goes to feed a very healthy microbiome. And so the understanding and the reverence for fiber in a land of Cheetos, say,
Right.
is so great. And that is so connected to whole foods plant-based. So as people start to seek the benefits of having a healthy microbiome and saying, oh, I need this, I desire this. And fiber is actually the way that I feed that healthy microbiome. So that's one. And another that I think is really interesting and emerging is soil health, and how, when we don't keep the soil healthy, it will have impacts on the ability of the, incredibly healthy fruits and vegetables that we grow in that soil to be healthy. So I think that connection is being made, and the easier ways that we can help people understand the connection to their own bodies. Like, hey, you might think that you're eating a really healthy salad, but if all of those vegetables were grown in soil that's completely devoid and of, all of the trace minerals and everything like that, you're really not getting as much out of that salad that you could be getting. And so really breaking it down for people and making that connection, I think is happening and is really exciting to me as well. So those are two things that I'm looking out for that we think about a lot, that I think people are starting to talk about and understand. And with that understanding comes a willingness to engage and buy elements that are representing those ideas.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. So the two trends you really mentioned were a conversation about fiber and soil health, which is very interesting because I knew a lot about fiber, but the soil health I wasn't as aware of. But it is interesting to see that there is more of an emphasis to our source of food as opposed to just purely what you're eating. Like you said, it's not just about the lettuce in my salad. It's about where it came from, the soil health of the lettuce that was grown as well, and its connection to our own bodies. Moving kind of on to the fiber thing a little more, I'm very interested to hear a bit more about it because in my perspective, I'd say that while the conversation about fiber is definitely growing, there still seems to be an immensely huge emphasis on protein instead of fiber, especially in my own friends or people around me. I see that for them, having a healthy meal, or what they define as a nutritious balanced meal, would be like 70% animal protein, a little bit of carbs, a little bit of vegetables, and that's an ideal meal for them. Whilst, of course, we know that fiber is what you need for a healthy gut microbiome, and it's about balancing the protein and the fiber and the vitamins and everything. There still seems to be a lack of awareness about the importance of fiber as opposed to protein, where people think that you can just take those laxatives or fiber supplements and load up on an animal protein. So what do you think about that trend in terms of just emphasizing purely on protein for what we call a balanced diet? And how do you think that can be tackled in the society?
You're 100% right. I think protein has the best PR of like any macronutrient I've ever seen, ever. It's just the king. Everybody's searching for it. It's absolutely true. The reason that it is so highly regarded, though, is part of that PR push. It's very easy for people to make the connection between what I'm eating and what it does for me. And those shortcuts and those like sound bites that are able to be shared on social media and like really easily understood is part of that journey. And so I think what I'm excited about is fiber's been around forever. People have been talking about fiber forever. And it's not a new conversation. What I find interesting and the new part of it is the connection of fiber to your microbiome, which is probably another trending conversation in general. I think there will always be people looking for essentially the quick fix pill. And that's not going away. That's human nature, right? That's the quote unquote, easy way to fix things. But I think people are realizing like our guts, the American gut is not healthy. And so when the pill doesn't work, when you still feel kind of crappy all the time, thinking about your microbiome as this living space within you that you can treat well or treat poorly. And you can't do things like eat a bunch of animal protein and then just take laxative. I mean, that's literally like binge drinking and then, and then I don't know, drinking a lot of water or something the next day. I think people might need to go through it in order to realize on the other side that that's not a way to live. So this idea of having a microbiome, which is the, environment inside of you that needs to be in balance. I think people are starting to understand that. And there is some conversation. I mean, people are kind of talking about their guts and like, that's the start, right? And healthy guts is like, it impacts your ability to think quickly and, how you feel. Besides just like the health benefits, but it makes your skin look great. There's so many wonderful things that people do seek out actively. And when the pills don't work and they can actually impact this really cool, microbiome inside of them and treat that well, I think that's a cool conversation. And you can't have that conversation about a healthy microbiome without talking about fiber.
I think it's a lot goes back to the American food system in terms of like people view diets as something more as a quick fix or their health as a quick fix rather than seeing it for how creating a healthy diet or lifestyle isn't just about taking a bunch of supplements and eating whatever you want throughout the day, but it's really about every single thing you put in your body matters and makes a difference. And there's no quick fix to having a healthy gut or a healthy lifestyle, a healthy mood. It is an amalgamation of all these factors from blue zones, like you said, exercise, community, diet, and especially in diet, it's not about just, eating whatever you want and taking that turmeric supplement later and calling it a day or having those ginger turmeric shots in the morning. Sure, that's great for you, but really it's about making sure that everything you put in your body is good for you, is not just there for just the one macronutrient protein, but is really working together to create a healthy environment inside of you. And I like the way you said it. It's a living environment. It's not a static thing that we're just putting things into. It's not a graveyard where we just put in whatever looks good to us in the moment and then regret it later. But it is an environment, a forest in there that you're nurturing through every single bite you take. And that's a really great way to put it. And now entering our second theme for the episode, let's explore the power of social entrepreneurship in sparking and fueling global movements. So far, we've heard all about Blue Zone's kitchen and Blue Zone's and the amazing work you do in really creating this whole foods plant-based system that I hope will reach millions and billions of people. And now that we're entering the theme of entrepreneurship, let's hear about your work. So you've led at powerhouse companies like Amazon and now Blue Zone's kitchen. And your journey from a corporate giant to a mission-driven role is truly inspiring. So I'd really love to hear what sparked the shift and how has your experience in diverse industries shaped your work at Blue Zone Kitchen?
What a great question. And I think one of the things that I really like about this question is that there is respect for the large corporations, which I have. I don't vilify large corporations. I actually think that they have a lot of power to do a lot of good when they can see the direct impact of their actions. One of the things that gets really difficult, speaking about the theme of setting up your environment for success, one of the problems with large corporations can be that the environment is not set up for its success when you are beholden to Wall Street every quarter and you've got to make those numbers every quarter. you're going to make decisions that are financially driven, maybe short term, and don't have the full impact picture in mind. So even starting with how a corporation is set up is very important. So one of the things that we set out to do when we created Blue Zone's Kitchen was to set up the organization itself as a public benefit corp. And it's very much in line with social entrepreneurism, because we're saying from the very beginning, we are not only set out to do good business, but we are going to do good business while we have a positive impact on the world. And we're going to be transparent about the impact that we have. And we will, focus on our social impact and our environmental impact. So that helps us from the very structure, from the very beginning, continue to stay focused on the areas that we believe in as human beings that are correct. And when the pressures come in of making the quarter and those sort of natural business pressures, we have the structure already defined to force us to have the broader impact goals as well. So it's not a maniacal mono focus on we just need to make profit. It's at what cost? So my personal journey, which you had asked about, I feel like my time in big corporate America was almost like an education. And I had the ability to work with fantastic leaders. I met some of the most really inspirational female leaders throughout my time at Kraft Foods and Mondelez, and some amazing thinkers at Amazon. And so the way to approach business, I like to call it, I know what good looks like, because of these large corporate structures where the bar is set very high. There's a standard to hit. And so coming into that, you learn so much about what being and creating safe food systems, creating, things that are reliable, things that are at least transparent on the internal side. And this proper way to do things often is very, very slow. So what good looks like often is like very slow moving, hard to change, has a lot resting in certain areas. So there's a large resistance to change. And, we have in a place like Kraft, there's a lot of owned manufacturing, and Mondelez, which had the Oreo cookie, like, you're not changing the Oreo cookie factory. Like, it's a very well-oiled machine. It makes perfect Oreo. Like, the idea of creating waves and creating change in that environment is, don't even go there. So that it's interesting to see the limitations of that environment, but to take from it, as I did, looking at it like an education, what I can learn in terms of setting up proper businesses that are fiscally responsible, that are food safe, that are meeting a need in the market, and taking that structure. And then when it was almost like too much of a burden on my own personal values in terms of the way I eat and what I believe is good for humans to eat, that's when I really started moving into moving away from the Oreos of the world and into what I consider better food systems and impacting the food system, taking all this knowledge and ways of doing work and bringing it to smaller environments to be able to say, okay, if this is what we believe is actually good for people, how can I take all of that, that ways of working and the sort of approach and bring it to this other concept, this other idea? And so that worked really well. And I feel like, you can be an entrepreneur from the very beginning and you can just come out being like, I'm going to create stuff. I personally benefited a lot from going corporate first and saying, what does good look like? How is this done on a large scale? So I can see how scaling happens, and then taking that knowledge and then being like, okay, let's go create stuff. So for me, that journey worked really well. And I feel like at Blue Zone Kitchen, it allows us to move much, much faster because we know how to do things. Actually, everybody involved in the brand has been around, is long in the tooth, as we like to say. We've been around the block a couple of times. And so we know how to make things happen. And we're making incredible stuff. But it is from being around and being within large corporations where we're able to pick up and learn those systems first.
That's very interesting, especially as most people I hear would be like, I was in a corporate for many years and it was a horrible experience. I'm so happy to be working in this nonprofit now. But I love hearing your experience where you had such a positive spin on it. And it wasn't about like, oh yeah, they're super profit driven. They're these evil entities I worked at. But instead, you took out all these beautiful learnings from it. You saw how scaling happens. You saw how to create these transparent, reliable systems. And you brought back all these learnings from these corporate structures into Blue Zone's kitchen to make it the most successful it can be, which is very, very refreshing to hear as a perspective where there's not this huge dichotomy between, a corporate or a mission-driven business. They're completely different and they're both like, one is better, one is worse, but you really look at it as just two different ways of operating and seeing how we can pick out the best things from one to benefit the other. So thank you for that perspective. And I'd love to dive a bit deeper into your philosophy of not vilifying large corporations. So you talked about how more than the corporation itself, it's more about how you set up an environment or how a corporation is set up. So of course, Blue Zone's kitchen is set up in a way that is there not to just maximize profit, but to maximize your impact on individuals all over the nation. But I'd say that a corporation, the way it's fundamentally set up is, of course, profit-driven, financially driven, like you said, setting those targets and meeting them. So how would you believe that corporates can ever be impact-driven, or would you ever say that there is any way that corporates can be seen as a career that works in increasing our impact in the world? Or would you say that it just depends entirely on the way that it's set up?
That is a great question. And I tend to be someone who is very active and participatory. And so I wouldn't want to be in an environment where I felt like I was giving up control, autonomy. And that might be true technically in a corporate environment where, I worked at Amazon and I could have thought of myself as a cog in this giant machinery. I was employee number, I don't even know what, tens of thousands. But what I took away from there, I was able to really understand within e-commerce, the business that I oversaw was really curated. And so how do you use machine learning to aid curation, which is typically a very high touch human, like it needs a lot of humans involved. And how do you use machine learning to mimic some of those so that you can like build those into certain systems? So there were certain things that I was able to get out of that time that I feel that was my empowerment. That was my learning. And Amazon is Amazon and it is huge, not because of me, but I got to be part of it. And I got to learn so much while I was in it. So part of it is mindset, 100%. Will corporations that are public companies always answer to the market? Yes, 100%. They will, because that's how they're set up. But does that mean that everybody is sort of like a robot inside. No. And I want to bring up this woman who I have met a couple times, but I follow her on LinkedIn, and I think she's so badass. So she's currently the CEO of The Honest Company, Carla Vernon. And she was at General Mills.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I first interacted with her. She was at General Mills, and she was leading, I think, their natural consumer goods products. But like General Mills, very large corporation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has financial goals to hit, needs to push out, like, I don't even know what they sell. They need to push out more cookies, right? So she had done an amazing job internally of saying there is a connection between the soil health and the products that we were getting. So we are steward of the land as General Mills, and we can give some of our profits, or we can at least give some of our business to those who are tending to soil health. And so from inside, given the large size and the stature of the organization, she was able to start a conversation about tending to the soil and how that built all the way up into cookies, and make that connection in a way that made the connection for, the corporate board to say like, oh, well, this makes business sense. And to make the connection for consumers to say like, oh, I feel good about buying these cookies. Mm-hmm. And all the while doing good. So when I say corporations, I mean, again, this is about like, are you engaged? Are you the owner of your own story? What do you believe in? You can absolutely make change. I mean, I think this woman is incredible. But you don't need the permission, right? Go do it if that's what you believe in. And I think that it's easier in a smaller environment, in a startup, to have a voice. But I'll tell you what, it is so much harder to raise money and keep a startup afloat. So there's a lot that comes with that ease of impact. Like your business might not be around after 6 months, even though it is pure in intention. It has to stick around to make an impact. So like, I think we need both. We need people on the inside saying like, this is how it should be in these very well-funded organizations, and making the case for why that makes for good business sense.
Mm-hmm. That is a very fascinating perspective. I'd say definitely a hot take, not something I've heard a lot, but it makes so much sense intuitively, where why are we, prioritizing one over the other to create impact when we can look at both things as corporates and startups as equally as impactful if you look at it the right way. Of course, there will be cogs in the machine, as you said. There will be people in Amazon who do it purely for the money or will feel like they can't make an impact. But I would say I completely agree that it is about your mindset. It is about taking that extra step. And if you have that fire inside of you to make a difference, it doesn't matter if you're in a corporate or a startup, you will create an impact. And that's for sure. But yeah, thank you for sharing that perspective of where we shouldn't be looking at startups or small organizations as the gold standard of making an impact. But, it can happen within a corporate. It can happen wherever you go. It's all about your own fire, your own mindset, and the way that you approach your career, essentially. And so that brings us to our next question. What do you think is the role of mission-driven businesses, B Corps, and entrepreneurship in being a key player in sparking and fueling global movements in the context of wellness and longevity and beyond? And do you think that corporates can match the fire in igniting these global movements as well?
I feel that the role of B Corps in some of these movements are essential, because they are showing the way that when you have a broader mission to do something that improves the world, you can also do good business. So I think that they are integral, almost like, canaries in the coal mine. They're the ones to show the way to a corporation that might honestly might not have the profits because they're falling behind because they're not engaging in these areas. So I absolutely think that those are that structure, that corporate structure allows for the individuals running that corporation to say, I do have a dual focus. I'm going to make profits by doing whatever it is I do while also changing the world for the better. And as they present that, like Patagonia, just an amazing company, right? And it does both. And so we need the Patagonias of the world to be able to say, look, it can be done.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I do think that definitely making a difference is, like you said, about being in an ecosystem of all these key players where, of course, one person doing something sparks all these different things, like you said. And you really need those social activists as well talking about making a difference. And you have those businesses backing it up with all these products. You have these corporations with their stuff. And I think it really is about having all these players in the scene to really spark a global movement. It's not the work of a singular entity that can do it. And it shouldn't be, it should be that we all work together, kind of the Blue Zone's philosophy of being in a community where everyone plays a role in making a difference. And it's not down to one business or one corporation or one activist to make that change happen, but it really is the work and individual impact of all these entities to create a meaningful impact. So we've talked a lot about your amazing work in corporate success, in Blue Zone success, in creating all these differences. So I'd love to hear where living in a society that glamorizes profit heavily, have there been moments where your values were put to test? So we've heard all about the good side of your career journey, but have there been any times where you felt that you weren't true to your values, and how do you go about that?
Because I've been in food for a while, I worked on a lot of different types of food, and not all of it has aligned to my personal beliefs in terms of what I want to feed myself, what I feed my children. As you mentioned at the top of the podcast, I have been working for 20 years in the industry. I now have much more power in order to say, this is where I want to focus and here's where I want to apply my skills. Whereas early on in my career, I didn't necessarily have the say of that. And that's where I would focus on, am I doing good for someone, even if it's not directly aligned to the way I would consider good? Then what am I learning? And what can I take away from this? So staying empowered and feeling like I'm giving towards a goal that is not harmful. And now I feel like I can say fully, hey, if it's not 100% aligned to the way I see the world, I don't want to be spending my time on it. And that's just where I am in my career. I think that most people will come up to a situation where something doesn't sit right, something doesn't feel right. I always remember back to my my days in business school. I went to Stern, NYU Stern. Shout out all you Stern. That was about business ethics, and the professor was like, if you are asked to sign something and like falsify something, your best move, and he was like, 50% of you will in your careers be asked to falsify something in business. And I was like, oh God. He's like, your best move is to put the pen down and walk away and just quit. Like, you actually, as an individual, that is your right to not do that, to not engage in that. And you're better off than saying, oh, let me sign this, but then I'll be a whistleblower, or let me try to change. Like, the train has left the station at that point, and they're looking for someone to, be the fall guy or gal. So you don't want to be that. So just put the pen down and walk out, proverbially. And I've always taken that to heart. I was like, okay, so that is my role. That is my move. Shall I ever come across a situation like that? And well, I share that as a piece of wisdom you can pick up or take down.
Mhm.
But I think that the likelihood is most people will come across that moment. And you only have yourself to live with.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you so much for being so honest with your answer. And that really is very insightful to hear, especially the way that before your career path, making an impact or being true to yourself meant that it's not causing harm to anyone. And that was your standard. And now it's kind of evolved into, and you've had the power to change it to, it's 100% aligned with my values. And that's making an impact. And that's what being true to yourself means. Which is, I think, a very powerful lesson for our listeners, where there's no one golden standard to what you think helping others or helping community means. And it obviously depends a lot on your own financial background or opportunities available to you, your different responsibilities as well, where there's not this one gold standard of I'm dedicating my life to helping this community means that you're doing it. Everyone has different standards, and it definitely depends on which step in your career path you're at, whether it's the beginning, whether it's the middle part of it, whether you don't know what you're doing yet. And I think it's very important to learn that we shouldn't be glamorizing this one size fit all form of impact, but there are these different ways to be true to yourself and to find what it means to be true to yourself along your career path as well. Thank you so much, Abigail, for sharing these incredible insights about Blue Zone's Kitchen, whole food, plant-based foods, and longevity and entrepreneurship, making an impact, all these amazing, amazing themes. Now we're at our final part of the podcast episode, which is our rapid fire round. So let's begin. First question is kind of a fill in the blank. So making an impact means?
Making an impact means leaving the world better than when you found it.
Love that. Second question is, who inspires you in the way they build community?
Heather Terry, I think, has done a really great job of building the community around the conversation of regenerative practices, both with her farmers and then creating that visibility to her customers so that people are also engaged in the outcomes of her farmers.
Love it. And last question, what could everyone do right now to make the world an even better place?
We're all connected. And I think that is something that maybe as you age, you might have more and more data points to realize, but we are all connected. And so there's a bit of grace that we can extend, a bit of optimism for humanity, and our ability to use the power of that connection to solve the problems that are ahead of us, whether those are thinking about the health of our earth or the health of our bodies, or the general health of our internal lives, and focusing on, sort of combating the loneliness that seems to have crept into our modern lives. And just knowing that core truth that we are all connected, I think coming from that place helps us make better decisions.
I love that. Thank you for your wonderful answers. And before we end off, I just want to ask something about Blue Zone's Kitchen. What is on the horizon for Blue Zone's Kitchen, and how can our listeners engage with or support the incredible work you're doing?
So Blue Zone's Kitchen we're just coming into year 2. So it is early days for us. So we are focused on getting out to more stores with our frozen meals. Currently, we're in about 1,500 stores across the U.S., including Whole Foods, where you found us, and then a bunch of other great retailers, which are all listed. If you're interested in buying us, you can go to bluezonekitchen.com and look at our store locator to find the nearest location to you. I'm also currently in the midst of the innovation cycle for bringing more meals to the shelf. We've had just such an incredible, successful initial first year with our meals, and it feels like we have great permission from people to keep up the innovation and bring even more fabulous meals and flavors forward. So that's where we're focused. We're doing more and more places.
Thank you. That's amazing. So truly, thank you for an incredible conversation and insights. I've honestly learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. I am so glad to see the amazing things that Blue Zone's Kitchen is doing and has accomplished already, along with what's to come next. Thank you so, so much for your time and lovely conversation.
Thank you so much for joining today. If you would like to get your voice heard on #Impact, just send a voice note at #impact.com/story. I will include the link in the show notes as well, so you can easily find it. And if you love what you're hearing here, please tell your friends about it too. I talk to you soon. Bye.